Yo, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be ranking every single live-action Spider-Man film from the worst to the best in my own personal opinion. So of course, I've been a fan of Spider-Man for as long as I can remember. I've seen all of the movies as soon as I possibly could in theaters, and I love this franchise. I love all of these films, the ones in the MCU, the Sam Raimi ones, the Amazing Spider-Man, and the Venom films, all of them. There's not a single movie on this list that I dislike. I'm only doing the live-action films just for this video. If you want to hear my thoughts on Into the Spider-Verse, maybe I'll talk about that in a future video, but my quick thoughts, I loved it. It's a fantastic movie. I just wanted to only include the live-action Spider-Man films for this specific list. But even the last spot on this list is a movie I like. I just definitely love the ones that are higher up a lot more. There's like a razor-thin difference between a lot of these movies. There's some options that can definitely change within just a rewatch. So I guarantee you this list is going to be different in like a couple days. I'm probably going to change my mind in a few days after I rewatch a movie here and there. That's just what happens. These Spider-Man movies move around a lot for me because I just love them all so damn much. There will be spoilers for all of the movies that I'm talking about today, so that includes No Way Home. So if you haven't seen these movies yet, don't watch this video unless you only want to watch certain portions of the video. Then just keep in mind, keep out a lookout for the movie poster, which will probably be right here somewhere, and you can know what movie I'm talking about as the poster is on the screen. So let's jump right into it with the number 10 spot, my least favorite live-action Spider-Man film, Spider-Man Far From Home. I do not hate this movie. I like this movie. It's like a 7 out of 10 for me. It's still a good movie that I can enjoy, but I have a lot of issues with it. To me, this is a much better MCU movie than it is a Spider-Man movie. Like, as an MCU movie, I enjoy it a lot more, but when I start viewing it as a Spider-Man movie, I'm just like, it's just not what I was looking for. But there's a lot of great stuff. The visual effects in this movie, especially with Mysterio, like especially that one sequence, was awesome. Everything with Mysterio and the illusions that he gives off, there's a lot of cool, interesting effects that go on with that. They kind of introduced concepts of the multiverse in here, but then it turns out it was just Mysterio with illusions, and it was never anything that has to do with the multiverse at all. We assumed it was going to be the multiverse leading into it, but it wasn't. So that was definitely disappointing, I think, for a lot of people, because they leaded it as a multiverse film with the trailers, and then it wasn't, there was nothing to do with the multiverse in it. So definitely a little bit of disappointment there. A great thing that I liked about the movie was Samuel L. Jackson. But something that is also kind of disappointing was that it was not actually Nick Fury. Now, I always thought this was kind of weird because he felt like Nick Fury the whole movie, unless Talos just did a really damn good job as Nick Fury, which I guess was the case because it felt like Nick Fury the whole movie. And then obviously you learn in the after credits that Nick Fury was never there. I didn't really like that. I was enjoying Nick Fury's, character in this film, but it was never Nick Fury. And I was like, okay then. And it's not Sam L. Jackson's problem. It's not his fault. I'm sure it was just the script, really. But I think maybe they should have made him act a little bit differently, or just have Nick Fury be there in the first place. I don't know. I get they're doing this for the Secret Invasion thing, but I don't know. It was still great to see him there nonetheless, because Sam L. Jackson is always a plus. So I definitely enjoyed him in this movie. And just seeing all the new locations and such was pretty cool. Like, that was partially a negative because I love New York City. I love seeing Spider-Man in New York City, but I was okay with one movie for them to be somewhere else. And the locations they went to were pretty interesting, especially the end battle on that bridge in London. Like, that was fun. That was a fun little, place to have Spider-Man be in. It's definitely very different than our typical New York place. So I enjoyed it. And lastly, something else I liked about the movie was that it kind of dealt with the theme of Peter having to balance Spider-Man life with school life. And pretty much all of the sequels do that pretty well, except for The Amazing Spider-Man, that was mainly balancing Spider-Man with his love life. But this one really did do that, also including the love life thing with MJ, which kind of goes into the negatives. I always thought this relationship with MJ was kind of iffy in this movie. I love it in No Way Home, which we'll talk about later, but I didn't like it in this one. I felt like it was really out of nowhere. It was just like she was a character. She was originally Michelle in Homecoming, and then she just out of nowhere, Peter's in love with her apparently, and it's just like, okay, like it just came out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like they could have had her be an interest to Peter in Homecoming instead of Liz, because Liz was awesome as a character because of what it did with Vulture, which we'll talk about later. But I don't know, I think there's something better they could have done there that would have made this more believable. So when it came to happen, I was like, okay, it wasn't as rushed as it kind of felt like it was in Far From Home. But it wasn't a big deal. It was just something that I kind of was like iffy on. My biggest issue with this movie is the fact that there's barely any serious moments. The movie is just jam-packed with MCU humor, but it's like the most cringy, childish humor for 90% of it. Like stuff like, you know, someone walking in on Peter with his pants off next to this Russian lady, and the guy takes a picture because he thinks he's about to have sex with this Russian lady. Like humor like that, that's not really that funny. And some stuff that just gets borderline ridiculous, like when he jumps out of the bus to web the drone that was about to kill that Brad guy, and he tells them to all look at goats outside, and they all just look at goats and they don't even see Peter literally jumping. It's just so goofy. Spider-Man's goofy, yes, but not like that. That's a totally different feeling of goofiness that just does not fit here at all, and I did not like it. I'm fine with Spider-Man being a comedic person. He should be comedic. That's why I loved Spider-Man No Way Home's, the interactions with Tobey, Andrew, and Tom. They were great. They were all funny. That makes sense. Spider-Man should be funny. But why is every character in this movie also funny? Why is everyone making jokes every 2 seconds? You got Betty Brant making jokes every 2 seconds. You got Ned making jokes every 2 seconds. MJ, the teachers, like literally everyone is a comedic genius. Aunt May. I mean, compare Aunt May in this to the past two Aunt Mays. The past two Aunt Mays maybe would make a funny remark once or twice and it would be a realistic, organic sentence. It wasn't like something forced. But Aunt May in this one, everything with Aunt May in this film is just jokes about her being Happy's fuck buddy. That's all it is. That's what she's degraded to, is just a fuck buddy for Happy. That's all she has to do in this movie. It's Aunt May, that's all you're giving her. So I was very against that. And Mysterio as a villain, although the visuals are awesome with him, I never really liked him as a villain. His motivations were very generic. It was very typical, just another person who just hates Tony Stark, and that's about it. And he manipulates Peter by getting the glasses, and I wasn't a big fan of his character. I thought he looked awesome and his abilities were really cool, and I'm hoping to see him back just because I like Jake Gyllenhaal, but I didn't care for his motivation at all. I just did not care for it, and there was more jokes thrown in with him too. The only serious moments you had were a couple moments here and there where Peter was grieving over the loss of Tony Stark, and those were good moments, but they were few and far between, and they usually were undercut by a joke by somebody at some point. So I didn't love this movie, but I liked it. It's still good. It's the bottom of my list, but it's still a movie that I enjoy. In the number 9 spot, Venom from 2018. So this is the first Venom film. Like I said, I am including the Venom movies just because why not? They're kind of part of the Spider-Verse now. Might as well just include them. And this movie, I actually really enjoyed when I first watched it. A lot of people didn't, but I was always okay with it. The best thing about it is Tom Hardy as Venom. By far the best thing. Probably one of the best casting choices I've ever seen for a comic book character. I mean, Tom Hardy is Venom to me now. Like, he's the perfect Venom. Or, I guess, Eddie Brock, but he's not really Venom. But you know what I mean. Well, he voice acts Venom in the sequel. He did in the first one, which is another awesome thing about this one, is the voice of Venom. Oh my god, I love Venom's voice in this movie. It is just menacing, and it's clear, it's legible. You can listen, you can hear it pretty well. And the look of Venom is amazing. They nailed the look of Venom. And I just love a lot of the scenes with Eddie interacting with Venom, especially when he first gets it and he's trying to deal with it and he's just like so confused, like what the hell's going on? Especially that one scene where he just is freaking out and he runs into the restaurant with Anne and he's like in the side of the lobster tank, like stuff like that. It was funny. It's a funny movie with a lot of funny moments, but there's also some serious moments later on. And at the same time, it's like you kind of expect it to be kind of funny because what's going on is a pretty funny situation. I mean, this isn't something that I feel like could be very seriously toned, you know what I mean? At least for the most part. I wanted a darker Venom movie, but when I really thought about it, like, would that really work? I don't know. I did want it to be R-rated, though. That's a big negative for this film. Not being R-rated definitely hurt it. I would love to see Venom bite off heads without them having to kind of like show it in the background a little bit so you can barely see him biting off the person's head. I want to see Venom do some disgusting ass shit. And you couldn't see that movie because it wasn't R-rated, unfortunately. Other stuff I liked, like I said, the humor was great. I think Eddie and Anne and their relationship was fun to watch. People said they didn't like that, but I had no problem with it. I think Anne was a fun character, and the Dan character was introduced. He was fun to watch. I enjoyed it. I thought the symbiote and the explanation of it was great. I thought the whole Life Foundation and the secrets of this facility, I thought it was interesting. Now, Riot, though, as the villain, I forget the guy's name. What was his name? Like Drake or something? So I forget the villain's name, like the actual guy's name, but he was generic, but okay, I guess. I think Riot was not the best villain to choose, the best symbiote, because he looked so similar to Venom in terms of colors. So when they had that end battle, especially at nighttime, it was very hard to see what the hell was going on. That was one of my issues. I liked the action in this movie, but the action at the very end, kind of hard to see what was going on, and that was one of my biggest issues with that. And so that kind of made some of the scenes not as enjoyable as they could have been. And I had the same issue with the sequel, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. As a whole, though, this is a fun movie. It's just not that great, though. Like, there's nothing about it that makes me go, oh my god, I need to watch Venom again. I need to see this movie again. It's just a fun movie that I think definitely allowed Tom Hardy to just have a great time with it, and it made for a little franchise that I think is gonna probably get a third one. I'm pretty sure they confirmed a third one. And can't wait to see more of it, even if it's just kind of fun, blockbuster fun. There's not really much depth to it, really. There's some interesting concepts there, but nothing that's deep enough for me to be like, yeah, that's a really solid movie. But it's a fun movie. And coming number 8 spot, only slightly beating the first one, is actually the sequel to Venom, Venom Let There Be Carnage. I was kind of disappointed with this movie. If you guys saw my reviews a couple months ago, I was actually very disappointed with this movie. But that's only because my expectations were so high. I was so excited for this movie. I was hoping it'd be R-rated. I was hoping it would be a really long movie with a really brutal carnage, and it wasn't that. But I'm not gonna let my expectations get in the way of my feelings. I still enjoyed the movie. I still gave it like an 8 out of 10 or something like that. It was still a fine movie. It was enjoyable. I liked it more than the first one. The best thing about the movie is definitely the relationship between Eddie and Venom. Now that they're established with one another, they kind of just had time to just, be with each other. There's a lot of funny moments with the two of them, and there's a lot of interesting moments too. Some stuff that actually gets a little bit deep and is actually somewhat consequential and interesting. But like, it actually ends in consequence because he actually ends up leaving him later in the film and he has to come back later and reunite, and it kind of just develops the relationship a little bit more, and it's a fun part of the movie. You also have Woody Harrelson as Cletus Cassidy, and although Cletus Cassidy as a villain wasn't that well developed, Woody Harrelson still killed it. He still did a great job. He was really fun to watch in this role, so I loved seeing that. The soundtrack in this movie, one of my favorite superhero movie soundtracks. It was balling, man. Marco Beltrami is one of my favorite composers. He's one that I think is very underrated, but he just killed it in this movie with that soundtrack. I mean, Venom's theme in this one, you have Carnage's theme. I mean, soundtracks in pretty much all these movies are pretty amazing, but this one especially was one of my favorites. I really had a good time listening to the soundtrack for sure. And I also thought Shrieker was fun. I didn't think she was the most interesting villain in the world, but she was fun to watch. So there was a lot of cool stuff here. There's a lot of good humor, but that's kind of where it ends, to be honest. Like I said, just like the last one, it should have been R. Venom's voice was just bad in this one, and it's not Tom Hardy's fault. It's whatever they did with the voiceover. It's so hard to tell what the hell he's saying, and it sounds like it's so different than this first. If you listen to side-by-side comparison, he sounded so much better in the first one. It's not even funny. Like, it's very different too.
Eyes, lungs, pancreas. So many snacks, so little time. We should be out there snacking on bad guys.
He sounds so much goofier and less intimidating in the second one, to be honest. Like, the first one, he's like, oh my god, I'm pissing my pants. But the second one, he sounds like, I just don't like it. I don't like it. It's not a voice that I like. They could have done a better job with that. And the movie was just too short. It felt very rushed. The plot was kind of just like gone through in seconds because of how quick this movie was. It was an hour and 40 minutes. It should have been like 2 hours at least, because there was a lot of stuff happening. So some scenes felt like it was going just way too fast, and it's like, slow down, breathe for a little bit, let us enjoy the moment instead of just making us not even be able to keep up with it. So I wasn't a big fan of how that was handled, but other than that, I enjoyed it, had a good time with it. It's a good movie. Okay, I have such a hard time putting this movie here because I'm very nostalgic for this movie. I love it, but I don't like it more than the top 6. I just don't, and I have to put one here. Like, there's not many bad things about this movie. There really isn't. I maybe have 1 or 2 bad things to say about it, and everything else is fine. It's just the stuff that's fine is not that fine, and this is going to be Spider-Man from 2002. That's in my 7th spot. It's hard to put it here, but you have to keep in mind, when rating movies, when reviewing movies and ranking them, you're not just talking about the negatives or just the positives. You're talking about both, right? There's like barely any negatives about this movie. It's a pretty solid movie. But there's not that many crazy good positives about it either. Like, there's nothing about this movie that makes me go, oh, I need to watch it. But let's talk about the stuff that I do like, though. Tobey Maguire, perfect Peter Parker. I've said this many times. I think he is probably the best Peter Parker there is. But in terms of Spider-Man, I think they're equally as good as one another. But in terms of Peter, I think Tobey's like just does the best at it. He just really has that just nerdy, socially awkward energy to him. I think the other two do good with that too, but Tobey just was beyond what they could do. And this movie does a great job with that. I mean, you have scenes where like Mary Jane's talking to him and he's literally like he doesn't even know what to say. He doesn't know what to say. And I love how that all played out. And I love his, getting the powers for the first time and his reactions to that and all that. It's done beautifully. Uncle Ben's death is done beautifully. Everything that you know and love about Spider-Man is done really well here. The whole scene where he's in the whole like wrestling arena trying to get the money was awesome. Seeing him trying to fight there, and that being the reason for Uncle Ben's death because he doesn't stop the guy, and then him having to go hunt him down. A lot of good story, a lot of good themes there. They're all well done, and I love it. Peter Parker's kind of transition to Spider-Man, which came like about halfway through the film, was fantastic. It wasn't too rushed. It wasn't too fast. It kind of came very progressively, and I thought it was done absolutely beautifully. I also think this movie was awesome for how revolutionary it was for its time. And one thing people don't really recognize about this movie that much is that this came out a year after 9/11, or actually less than a year after 9/11. And that's really impactful because it's a New York movie, obviously. It's set in New York City. So when you have moments like on the bridge with Green Goblin, where all the New Yorkers are coming together and throwing the trash at Goblin, saying if you mess with one of us, you mess with all of it. Like, stuff like that was just really morale boosting for New Yorkers at the time. I was 2 years old at the time, but I just know from other people, they all said that's what the movie did for people. That's one of the reasons a lot of people went to go see it. Also because it's Spider-Man. People love Spider-Man even before this movie came out because it was a very big comic book. So it was revolutionary. So you got to give it some appreciation there. And Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, amazing. But honestly, he's even better in No Way Home. Just keep that in mind. The one thing I don't like about this movie, I still don't really like MJ that much. No, I don't, not as a person. Like, I don't think she's a terrible human being. I just never found her very convincing as Peter's love interest, especially because in this movie, I think what they could have done to fix it is just not have her get with Harry. Have her be with Flash in the beginning, and then she leaves Flash, and then the rest of the movie, she's just with no one, and then she just, falls in love with Spider-Man and have that play out that way. But her getting with Harry just makes things kind of weird because then she kisses Peter while she's still dating Harry, and it's just like, you're kind of cheating on him, It's, I don't know, it's hard to root for a relationship when she's cheating, and I just never really liked how they handled that. And that's pretty much all I gotta say. Like, the rest of the movie's fine. I love that ending sequence on the bridge. I love the fight against Green Goblin, especially how brutal it got at the very end there. It's a great movie, but I just don't think the positives are as high as how I feel about some of these other movies. I was never that emotional with this movie because it was the first. So it was hard to get very invested in them yet. You don't really get very invested until like the end of the movie. So then when you get to the second one, that's when you start getting really invested, and that's when things start hurting, and that's when emotions start kicking in. This one, Uncle Ben's death is sad and all, but it's not something that's going to bring tears to my eyes because I don't really know the characters that well at that point. You don't really get to know them until later on. And that's kind of how I felt about this movie. And that's maybe how I feel about a lot of first movies, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's why I tend to always love sequels for some reason, but I think that's one of the reasons. It's just the movies just can get better because you understand the characters more as they go along. That's just how it works. Number 6 spot, Spider-Man Homecoming. So this is a razor thin difference between the one I just talked about and this one. And honestly, the next 3, like up until the number 3 spot, these are all razor thin difference. Like, they're pretty much almost just as good as each other to me. Like, I can switch these any day. Like, honestly, if I watch the original Spider-Man again, it might go to my number 3 spot. Like, that's how serious I am when I say there's a razor thin difference between a lot of these. I had to really make this decision. It was hard to make because it's so damn close, but I had to make it. Spider-Man Homecoming from 2017, my number 6 spot. This one is much more enjoyable than Far From Home to me for a lot of reasons. I think a lot of people give it shit because it is a much smaller scale movie. There's not anything crazy going on. There's no high stakes, crazy emotional moments. But I'm okay with that. I was okay with that for one film. I didn't like that Far From Home. Kind of felt like it just was the same shit, where it was very, not smaller stakes, but like, because the stakes definitely rose in Far From Home, but it was still very childish in a lot of ways. And this one was definitely that too. It felt at a lot of moments like a Disney Channel show at some moments, but it worked because this is the first iteration of Spider-Man in the MCU, and he's 16 years old or 15, whatever. I don't know. He's young, so it makes sense why it would be this way, and I think it worked. Like, I don't think every Spider-Man has to be, you know, very adult and very mature. I think it's okay having one that's, you know, a little bit more friendly, and this one was that. And I think it worked. I think it worked for what it was trying to do, and I think it nailed it for the most part. I like how he has to deal with a lot of typical high school problems. It definitely brought me back to back when I was in high school. Well, I say that like I wasn't in high school like 2 years ago. Like, I saw this movie when I was still in high school. Whatever. You get what I mean. It's relatable to high school experiences and stuff. So that was awesome. I think Tom Holland did a great job as Peter in this one. It's definitely a Spider-Man as well. I know a lot of people give him shit for certain things, but I think in terms of his portrayal, not in terms of the writing, he did great. It's definitely one of the best villains as well in this movie. Vulture, I would say he's within the top 3 best Spider-Man villains of all time, and I would say he's within top like 5 best MCU villains. Actually, before No Way Home, I would have probably said he was like top 2, but I think Green Goblin's like definitely a little bit higher after seeing him in No Way Home, because technically now they're a part of the MCU, so you got to include those Spider-Man No Way Home villains. I'm talking about MCU. But Vulture is fantastic. He's a much smaller scale villain. He's just Liz's dad, which was an awesome twist, by the way. That twist with Vulture being Liz's dad was probably one of my favorite twists in a superhero movie ever. I remember seeing that in theaters. I was like, oh my god, because it was so like awesome, and it made for one of the best scenes in a Spider-Man movie when he was in the car with Liz's dad, Vulture, and he was sitting there, and there was just very tension building, and music was building. Michael Giacchino's score, by the way, is really good in this film. The tension just kind of building while they're in the car, and that when he gets, you know, when they get to the high school, he pulls out the gun when she gets out of the car. He has that talk with him, and very good stuff. And there's a lot of themes of responsibility here, just like there is in every Spider-Man movie, really, where Peter feels a need to help. He's like, I want to prove myself. I'm going to do it. And that's all this movie's about, is him trying to prove himself to Tony, trying to prove himself to other people. He's seeking validation, pretty much. He wants to be known as a capable superhero because he has powers, and he feels a need to use them for good, because otherwise he feels like he's wasting his potential. And I really like that. I really like how they managed with all this. There's a lot of awesome sequences in this movie. You have the one with the boat. You have the scene by the Washington Monument. You have a lot of awesome sequences that make for a pretty damn good Spider-Man movie. There's some issues though. Some of the humor, just like Far From Home, does not fall for me. It's a lot of Disney cringe humor that just does not work, and it's just like, that's not funny. Like, it's the same shit too. It's everyone's a comedic genius. Why does everyone have to be funny? Why can't Spider-Man be funny? Maybe an additional character like Ned could be funny because he's a funny guy. But why is everyone funny? Why does everyone act like a 12-year-old in this movie? Even the teachers act like 12-year-olds. And Aunt May, she does nothing. She just makes jokes about larb or whatever. She was like, I larb you. Like, I don't know. That's all she says. She has one good scene in the movie. This is not Marissa Tomei's fault. Marissa Tomei did a great job. It's just the writing. They didn't give her anything interesting except for that one scene where she was, you know, comforting Peter when he was upset. That's all she did. That's the only good scene with her. Everything else was just, she's hot Aunt May. That's all she was kind of degraded to it. I just didn't like how they handled Aunt May in the MCU. That's all I'm saying. And although I don't mind Iron Man being in this movie, I don't mind the focus on him trying to, you know, become an Avenger and stuff. I don't mind that. What I do mind is the Stark suit, especially with the Karen and all this technology and stuff. It's a bit much. They fixed that issue now with No Way Home, but in this movie, it's like, it doesn't even feel like Spider-Man. It feels like, people say this, and I kind of agree. It does feel like Iron Boy Jr. a little bit, because it's basically an Iron Man suit that's just, it looks like a Spider-Man suit. That's basically what it was. And I wasn't a big fan of how that was dealt with, but thankfully the Karen voice was gone by Far From Home. Was it gone by Far From Home? Did he use Karen? I don't remember if Karen even showed up back in Far From Home. I totally forget, but I didn't like that much. Regardless, the rest of the movie, though, a great, smaller scale Spider-Man film that I really enjoy. And honestly, part of me would feel like Spider-Man, the original, might be better, but like I said, razor thin difference. Coming number 5 spot, the most underrated Spider-Man of all time, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I will never understand the obsessive, over-the-top hate with this movie. I will agree, though, this is probably the most flawed Spider-Man film. I probably have the most negatives to say. I probably have the biggest issues with this movie. So in that case, I can understand some of the complaints. But in the same sense, it's one of my favorites in terms of the positives. There's so many amazing things about this movie that I kind of forgive some of those negatives. We'll talk about it. So first of all, this is the best looking Spider-Man to date. I will say that wholeheartedly. I think it looks better than No Way Home even. I'm gonna say it. The visuals are incredible. The mix of the amazing special effects and some of the practical work that they do in this movie. They do some practical work. It's really good. The web swinging especially is just phenomenal. I mean, it's like the best web swinging we will probably ever see, unless they decide to enhance it sometime. There's some good web swinging in No Way Home, don't get me wrong, but the best to date in here, for sure. Especially that opening scene when he's coming down and he's going around New York. I mean, it's Spider-Man in all its glory. So I love that. Sally Field as Aunt May in this one might be my favorite version of Aunt May. It might be my favorite Aunt May movie, if that makes any sense, like in terms of her character in this movie, especially for that one scene which this whole storyline with Peter's parents, we'll talk about that in the negatives. I didn't like that. I thought it was a waste of time. This is the only good thing out of that storyline. The only good thing out of that storyline is because Peter is so obsessed with trying to find more information about his parents, Aunt May kind of feels like, damn, does Peter like think he really needs more than me? Am I not doing enough? Am I not, looking after him the way I should have been? And she kind of feels like upset about this, but then Peter, has to reaffirm her that no, it's not that. I want to figure it out, and you're more than enough. And I just love that scene. It's a very emotional scene. It's a beautifully done scene. That was one of my favorite, actually no, it is my favorite Aunt May scene ever, for sure. So that was awesome. I love that. The Peter-Gwen relationship in this one is incredible, just like the last one. Their chemistry together is fantastic, and it ends in heartbreak. It ends in heartbreak, we all know, with probably one of my favorite scenes in Spider-Man history, where she's fallen and he's trying to get her, and it just doesn't work. And because the theme of this movie, which this is my favorite thing about it, the whole theme of this movie is time. I love when movies have very overarching, big overarching themes like this that are very unique to this. I don't really think many other Spider-Mans focus on time as much. Actually, no, some of them do, but this one especially. Like, it hits hard with it, right? Even Gwen's speech is talking about time, how time is precious. We don't live forever. We got to make the best of it. And he's trying to juggle a lot in this movie because he doesn't know what he should do in terms of, the situation. And ultimately, what he realizes is that he can't save everyone. He doesn't have the time to save everyone. And quite literally, a clock kills her. She's in a clock tower, and the clock changing as he's holding it, like he's holding the gears, and the clock strikes down. The clock literally is what snaps the web and leads to Gwen's death. Time literally kills her because he doesn't have the time to save everyone. And he's trying the whole movie to save everyone, and he just can't because he's a hero, but he's not freaking Superman, He's not that powerful. He's not that insane. So I love how that's done, and I love what it does to his character in the end. And seeing that continue into No Way Home was just glorious, man. Seeing that development, and clearly it brought him down a dark path, and he admits it in No Way Home. He admits it. I think No Way Home made this movie slightly better. I think it did. I think it would have been a spot lower. I probably would have had it below. I might have had it below Spider-Man 2002, to be honest. But I think No Way Home made this better. I think it made Andrew's character development progress to another movie. So therefore, I feel so much more attached to this story now and his character in this movie and what he goes through at the end there and how that all wraps up. So good. So damn good. I love the designs in this movie. The suits are amazing. And I say suits S, because not just Spider-Man's suit, which is my favorite Spider-Man suit of all time, for sure, this suit. Also, Electro's design, people hate it. I love it. I think Electro looks awesome in this movie. I don't care that he doesn't look anything like the comics. I don't give a shit. He looks awesome. He looks intimidating. He looks crazy. And the effects they do with his electricity is awesome. Green Goblin, I think he looks awesome too. He looks like an actual goblin in this one. He looks disgusting. He looks gross, but that's the point. In Rhino's suit, I didn't love it, but it was in for like 2 minutes of the movie, and when it was there, I thought it was cool. I thought it was fine. The designs in this movie, awesome. And even just the costume designs, like they have a really good design for like Gwen. It kind of looks somewhat comic accurate. I love a lot of the designs in this movie, the locations too. Everything looks beautiful. This is just a very beautiful movie to look at pretty much throughout the entire film. I also kind of like Electro as a villain. This is also something that No Way Home made a little bit better, but I kind of like him as a villain. I do. I never hated him. I always thought his motivation was weird, but I didn't ever think it was awful like a lot of people did. So Electro's fine. Then we get to the negatives. Okay, there's a lot of negatives. Harry's motivation for getting Spider-Man's blood is kind of unnecessarily urgent. They make it seem like he needs it now, but they literally say in the story that he doesn't need it now because he's not going to die until, assuming the disease works the same way as his father, he wouldn't die till like 30, 40 years later. So it's like, why is it such an urgent issue? Why are you freaking out right now? You know what I mean? Like it didn't make any sense, and they could have fixed that by just explaining that disease a little bit differently, making it work a little bit differently, where it wasn't supposed to be in him so early, and so therefore it was an urgent situation, and then I would be okay with it. But even then, I wasn't a big fan of how they handled that. I think Dane DeHaan does a great job as Harry here. I never had a problem with him as Harry, but I just think what they gave him was just strange. I wasn't on board with it the whole way through, but I loved his appearance at the end. I loved that fight scene with him at the end, so I wasn't, completely against him as Green Goblin. I just think his motivation was a bit ridiculous. The parent storyline, complete waste of time. Every second with the parent stuff, it was like probably 15 minutes of the movie. It wasn't that much. I was just not on board with it. I didn't care, nor was the answer as good, because the answer was one of the stupidest answers ever, where they said that essentially the spider DNA was like from his father, therefore he is the only one who could be Spider-Man. Like, that's completely defeats the purpose of Spider-Man. You know what I mean? Like, Spider-Man's supposed to be the everybody, like, everyday person. It's supposed to be anyone. It could be anyone. But to be like, oh no, it has to be Peter Parker, that just defeats the purpose completely. It takes away a lot of the story of Peter, and I like to just pretend it doesn't exist in this movie. So it makes the movie more enjoyable for me. And the last negative that I want to talk about, it just sets up a lot that we never get to see play out. You know what I mean? They had a lot more planned. They had a Sinister Six movie plan. They had Amazing Spider-Man 3 plan. A lot more planned. They never went to fruition. So they spent a lot of the movie setting up stuff. They spent a lot of the movie just planning ahead of time rather than just staying and telling a solid story. Even though I did like the story to this movie, it's just they could have spent more time developing that story. They could have spent more time developing Peter and Gwen, or Electro, or Green Goblin, or more stuff with Aunt May. They could have done a lot more of that, and I think it would have been a much better movie. But still, I love it. I don't get the hate for it, the insane hate. I get that there's some issues, but there's also a lot of great stuff. So, also, Hans Zimmer's score is, oh my god, amazing. Hans Zimmer is a god amongst men, and this is probably my favorite Spider-Man soundtrack to date. So, yeah. And keeping the pattern up with the underrated Spider-Man movies, number 4 is going to be Spider-Man 3. So I'm very nostalgic for this movie. Like, this is definitely somewhat biased because I'm very nostalgic for Spider-Man 3. I saw this in the theaters when I was 7 years old, and this is when I was first, like, I liked Spider-Man before this, but this is when I was, like, starting to become in love with it, essentially, because I saw it in theaters and I was like, wow, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And this movie, just like The Amazing Spider-Man 2, has a lot of issues, for sure. Probably the second most flawed Spider-Man, but again, like Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2, there's so many good things about it that I don't really care. I don't really care that there's a lot about it that I don't like, because there's so many things about it that I love. So it's okay. It's fine. It doesn't really matter that much to me. First of all, the movie is unintentionally hilarious. This is one of the most memeable and hilarious movies in the Spider-Man franchise. It just is. Like, it's not like forced humor either. It's not like MCU where it's like they're trying to make you laugh. It's like everything is just there because it's there. They're telling a story, and the story happens to be funny. That's the difference between MCU humor and Spider-Man 3 humor. Spider-Man 3 humor is the story just happens to be funny. A kid who gets the symbiote that completely enhances his characteristics and makes him act like a wannabe douchebag when in reality he's just a nerd, so he comes off as a nerdy douchebag, is hilarious. Seeing him doing the dance, I never thought of that as forced humor. That was never trying to make the audience laugh. That was trying to make the audience go, what the hell is Peter doing? And it works, and it's hilarious now. It's hilarious to me, and I love it. And a lot of the stuff with the other stuff in the movie, like Harry like smiling and then the bus comes by and then he just disappears, like that's a very campy Sam Raimi type thing to do. But I don't think they're trying to make the audience laugh, but it just comes across as so funny, and I love that. I love a lot of the unintentional humor in this movie. I mean, give me Rent, like that's not even supposed to be funny, but it just freaking is because the actors just do it so well. J. Jonah Jameson, I didn't mention him with Spider-Man 2002, but he's a standout part of this movie too. Everything with him is funny, but not because they're forcing humor, but because J.K. Simmons is just funny in the role. You know what I mean? They're not trying to make us laugh. They're just doing some funny scenes and they come across as funny, and I love it. I love it. It's great. Emo Peter. I love Emo Peter in this movie. I'm sorry. I want darker sides to Spider-Man. I do like a darker side to Spider-Man, if it's temporary, of course. I don't want to see it for, too many movies, because he needs to redeem himself at some point, and he does in this movie. But seeing him go down this dark path because of the symbiote, and not just because of the symbiote's just enhancing those, dark thoughts he's been having, but he's having those dark thoughts because he finds out that Uncle Ben's killer is still out there. And he's also dealing with some issues with MJ and such. And there's a lot of things going on with him in this movie that's leading him down a darker path. And we get to see it. We get to see him take his anger out on Sandman in a really awesome scene. And then he eventually just loses it. And he even ends up hitting Mary Jane. Like, we don't really like Peter in this movie that much. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being against the protagonist for some part of the film, as long as he redeems himself and makes up for it. And he does. He does. So I like that. Sandman is a great villain. I have seen people shit on him for a lot of reasons. I liked the whole story with him being the actual killer to Uncle Ben because of what they do with it. The idea is weird, but the execution's perfect to me. Because the storyline or the theme of forgiveness is so present in this movie and in the whole Sam Raimi trilogy, really, but it's so present in this film. The theme of forgiveness, right? Forgiving people, giving them second chances, letting them, letting bygones be bygones or whatever. This movie has one of my favorite scenes in Spider-Man, especially at the very end when Spider-Man, or Peter, I guess, is talking to Flint, and Flint's explaining what happened with Uncle Ben. And when he tells him, I forgive you, and he's got tears coming down, and Flint's got tears, is one of my favorites. I can't watch that scene without crying. I physically can't. Because it's so beautiful, because he's not only forgiving Flint, he's forgiving himself too. People don't realize that. Peter is forgiving himself in that moment too. He's not just saying, I forgive you to Flint, he's also saying it to himself. Because he has not forgiven himself for Uncle Ben's death at all. He's always been blaming himself for this whole trilogy. And he finally forgave himself because he was able to forgive someone else as well. Love that. I freaking love that. MJ and Peter have to have a lot of forgiveness between each other too. Harry, a lot of forgiveness between him and Peter. So many things of forgiveness in this film. I just love how it's done. Harry's death is done beautifully too. Harry's character has always been a character I've enjoyed thoroughly throughout the franchise, and his death always makes me cry as well. Like, I love it, man. The action in this movie is some of the best Spider-Man action ever, in my opinion. Like, they have a lot of action in this movie. You have Peter versus Harry in the very beginning. You have another Peter versus Harry fight later on. You have Peter versus Sandman twice. You have Peter versus Venom versus Sandman, and then Harry comes in and joins the fight at the very end. This is a high-budget, crazy action-packed movie from start to finish. It's fast-paced too, but it's also a long movie. There's so much to this movie, and people give it shit for that. I'm okay with it, though. I'm okay with it. The soundtrack is amazing in this movie as well. Danny Elfman actually didn't do this soundtrack, surprisingly. I forget the guy's name, but someone else did. And he reused a lot of the Danny Elfman stuff because obviously it's owned by Sony, and I think he did a great job with remixing it and making it work for this film. So I really enjoyed that. The only things I didn't like about this movie, Venom, although I am okay with him because, look, I know people give him shit for being very underdeveloped and not really having much purpose to him. I didn't care that much because he was mainly just used as a pawn to get us into this end battle. But I think it would have been way more impactful if maybe he did have a better reason for wanting to do the things he was doing and maybe actually make Venom like actually Venom instead of just a symbiote. It was not actually Venom, let's be real here. I don't even like calling him Venom because it wasn't really Venom. I don't know. It didn't feel like Venom is what I'm trying to say. But I thought he was okay. It wasn't like, you know, it wasn't ruining the movie for me or anything. That's all I'm saying. It wasn't ruining anything. The Harry amnesia story is kind of all over the place too. It's just like too convenient for how that happens. I like Harry's character and all, but it's a bit too convenient. I think there's other ways they could have handled that. And there's some stupid scenes like when MJ breaks up with Peter. I always watch that and I'm like, MJ, why can't you just tell Peter? Like, Harry can't hear what you guys are saying from that far away. So just whisper to Peter real quick, be like, yo, Harry's trying to kill me, and he says he's going to try to kill you unless I break up with you. So go attack him right now and, you know, figure this out or something. Because, you know, something like that. Why couldn't MJ say that? I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me. Also, having, you know, MJ and Harry kiss in this one. It was just, there were a lot of stuff that I just think they shouldn't have done with MJ in this one as well. I clearly didn't love MJ's character throughout these movies all that much, but I don't hate her either. I definitely enjoyed the stuff with her and Peter, and I like how they end up together in the end. I think it's beautifully done. It's just some of the stuff in between was a little iffy for me personally. And there's also some weird dialogue choices, like some weird piece of dialogue in this movie that are just, it's like what? You know, there's some weird off-putting dialogue that I always thought was iffy, but not terrible. Like stuff like the one scene where Gwen is like dangling off the building, and Captain Stacy's just looking at it like, oh wow, my daughter's like hanging off of a building about to die, and then he's not like worried or anything. He's not like freaking out. Oh my god, my daughter. And Eddie's just chilling there like, oh, I'm dating your daughter, by the way. It's like, she's about to die. Like, it's just weird stuff like that. I know these movies are a little bit campier than most movies, but that's too much for me. That was a little too much. Regardless, Spider-Man 3, love this damn movie. Number 3, The Amazing Spider-Man from 2012. So this one and the past couple I've talked about, like I said, razor thin difference. These move up and down all over the place. It's hard for me to really choose, but The Amazing Spider-Man is the one I'm going to put number 3 because there's a lot about this movie I love. The darker tone for this film is something that I really did enjoy. I think Spider-Man needed a bit of a change from its very campiness nature of the Raimi films, which I think worked very well for the Raimi films, but I kind of like having some more serious tones. I could tell they were going for the Dark Knight vibes with that, but that doesn't mean the movie takes away from the Spider-Man fun, because it definitely doesn't. Spider-Man is still very fun in this. You still have scenes like the one where he's going against the car thief guy and he's like making jokes with him. Spider-Man in this movie is great. Like Andrew Garfield, like I said before, he kills it as Spider-Man, and I think he's one of my favorites. I can't choose. I physically can't choose between the Spider-Man. I try to like make a decision, but it's impossible. They're all perfect to me. But even as Peter, although I think I like Tobey's Peter more, I still like his Peter in this one. It's very different. It's a very different take on it. He's more of an, skateboarder, edgy guy rather than he's still nerdy. He's still nerdy Peter Parker. It's just he's not as, I guess, he's not nerdy in the same way that someone like Tobey was in the first Spider-Man, but he still works as a nerd. He still works as Peter Parker in this film. It's just a different type of nerd, and I think it works. Peter and Gwen's relationship, although slightly rushed, I still liked a lot. It was rushed in a endearing way. I think it only worked because their chemistry was so good. You know what I mean? Like, I think the chemistry between Andrew and Gwen, or Andrew and Emma Stone, is just so damn good that like it didn't really matter that it was rushed. So it just felt like they've been dating for years. You know what I mean? And they just played off each other really well in this movie. And I kind of like how it was very different than the original trilogy, because we didn't have to wait 2 movies till the very end of the second one actually to have the main love interest find out his identity, which just kind of happened like halfway through the first film. I kind of like that. It was very different. And yeah, I get some people wanted him to kind of be, secretive for longer. I was completely okay with him not being secretive with her because he trusts her. They were close and such. So I was okay with that. Captain Stacy in this movie, played by Dennis Leary, awesome. He is such a great character in this movie, such a great addition to this movie, because not a lot of Spider-Man movies do a lot of stuff with the cops being after Spider-Man, the vigilante side of Spider-Man. We don't get to see that in really many other Spider-Man films, and we saw that a lot here, and it made sense. We got a masked person going around New York swinging webs around, and it's gonna raise some eyebrows. And I like how the cops are kind of after him for a lot of this film. Some weird moments where he starts, the one cop starts shooting at him when he's not even moving. I'm like, okay, that's a little over the top, but I really still enjoyed that side of this movie. And then how it plays out in the end, where eventually the New Yorkers all help him out with the cranes, and he's swinging, and the music's great. James Horner's soundtrack's incredible here. I've been saying that about all the movies because Spider-Man just always has incredible soundtracks. But of course, it all leads to Captain Stacy eventually dying in the end, which makes for a very emotional scene. And I like how it begins the whole storyline of him not wanting Peter to involve Gwen in his life because it's dangerous, obviously. And then that carries over to Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I loved all of that. Every second of that was awesome. And I'm conflicted on the Lizard character because although he's a very generic villain, his, plan and stuff, it's very generic stuff. It's done really well, though. So although it's generic, I still like it, which is weird, but that happens sometimes where things are generic, but it's still done so well that it's like, okay, I'll let it be generic this once. But it does feel very similar to kind of a mix between Green Goblin and Doc Ock, to be honest. It's that whole science thing. It's like, okay, I did it to myself. I cured myself. Let me cure everyone now, because the stuff starts taking him over. He's like, I gotta cure everyone. I gotta, throw this serum and make everyone reptiles. And it's a cool concept. I just think it's executed really well in terms of the Lizard, how he looks awesome. Somehow his CGI is worse in No Way Home than he is in this one. I don't get that, but he looks awesome in this one. He has a lot of cool fight scenes with Spider-Man in this as well. I think he has a lot of good moments, especially when he's just Kirk Connors as well. So this movie, I don't have many issues with, to be honest. As I said before with Amazing Spider-Man 2, Sally Field's Aunt May is great here, and also this version of Uncle Ben is great. A lot of fun stuff here, and just like the first Spider-Man, him getting the powers and first, dealing with the powers, it's all really fun. It's all done in a really fun way, an interesting way, and it's really enjoyable to watch Andrew Garfield kind of react to these situations in really interesting ways. My only real issue with this film is that a lot of it does kind of replay similar moments from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man from 2002. Like a lot of the situations of, getting the spider bite for the first time, Uncle Ben's death, it feels very similar. I know it's got to be the same story, of course, the same origin, and I liked seeing the origin, but I think there's ways they could have made it different in a more interesting way. But instead they did it in different ways that weren't as interesting, like the way Uncle Ben died. I mean, in the last one, it was a very, crazy thing because it was him trying to make money to impress a girl, and that's what led to him eventually letting the robber go and Uncle Ben dying. So it was like him just trying to get a girl is what got her killed. But in this one, it was just him going to get chocolate milk and he didn't have enough money. And it just was a very different situation that wasn't as intense, wasn't as deep, I guess you can say. That's my only issue with this film. It's just a lot of it does replay some of those similar moments from the first Spider-Man, which is the very nature of it being a remake, so it's not a big deal, but it definitely is something that takes this film down just a tad bit. And there's a couple of weird editing choices too in this movie in a couple different scenes. Like there's one scene where Gwen gets attacked by the Lizard, and the Lizard opens up the thing that Gwen's hiding in, and Gwen does a scream that is just not synced with her voice at all. You could tell it was a voiceover scream or it was a different take or something. It was just, I guess she did a really good scream, but for some reason, instead of using the take where she actually did that real scream, they used a different scene. It was a weird editing choice because it came off as a weird little scene. A couple things like that happened in the film. Everything about this movie, I love. Literally everything else. I really enjoyed The Amazing Spider-Man. I think it's highly underrated. So yeah, that comes to number 3 spot. And as for the top 2, this was a really hard choice. So the next 2 are definitely much higher than 3 through 7 or whatever that I had. There's definitely a bigger gap between my number 3 spot and my number 2 spot. But these top two are within my top 10 favorite comic book movies ever. They're high. Obviously, one of them being the one that just came out, and another one being another film that I'm sure if you guys did Process of Elimination, you know which one I'm talking about. It's a very hard choice. It might change after I see No Way Home again, I don't know. But as of right now, Spider-Man No Way Home is coming in number 2 spot. So yeah, I'm on the hype train. I'm there, but I'm not gonna say it's I'm not gonna go as far as saying it's better than my number 1 spot. So Spider-Man No Way Home is a fantastic movie. The best part about it, obviously, is the return of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. That is the best part of this movie. I love Tom Holland in this film, but I mean, come on. Tobey and Andrew, seeing them again together is great. And that's the best part, is them together, not just them separately. I do wish we got more scenes with them separately doing other things, but regardless, their interactions with each other is amazing. The chemistry between these 3 actors is unheard of. It fits so well in the MCU as well. It doesn't feel totally inconsistent. It works perfectly. Loved every second of it. But I just wanted more, to be honest. Like, I was like kind of hoping for even more than what we got, more interactions between these characters and the different villains. I would have loved that. But still, regardless, just even having them in the first place is already a massive positive. This movie also fixed pretty much all my main issues with MCU Peter, being that, he was relying on Tony Stark and he wasn't necessarily this poor person who had to deal with a lot of, real issues, very relatable issues like what other Peter Parkers had to deal with. But the ending fixed that, because now no one knows who he is. So now he has to deal with those things while still keeping his identity as Spider-Man a secret, which is exactly what Spider-Man should be. And I'm very glad that they went with that direction. Can't wait to see what happens from here on out. And he also made his own suit. That was a very comic accurate suit. That suit at the end looked amazing. The humor in this movie, although I feel like just like the other 2 MCU Spider-Man movies, there was way too much humor. Definitely this one had way too much humor, but it was really good humor. It was really funny humor. I laughed a lot in this movie, especially with the stuff with Tobey and Andrew. They were hilarious. I loved it. I didn't like the villains being funny, though. I feel like some of those villains just shouldn't have been funny. They should have just stayed serious, like their original counterparts, or not the original, their original versions in the other movies. But still, seeing the interactions between them were great. All the serious interactions were awesome. I didn't like the fan service callbacks with like some of the quotes being repeated. That just felt really off-putting, like Norman saying, "I'm something of a scientist myself." It just came off as so forced. But other stuff like Tobey mentioning his back, that's fun fan service that I think worked and was good. Also, big fan service was, and also not even just fan service, it was also character developing, was of course Andrew saving MJ, which was a big character growth moment for Andrew Garfield. I loved that. This movie has a lot of high stakes. It's deeply emotional, especially with Aunt May's death. I thought Aunt May's death was handled very well, and it was a great way to push MCU Peter into a very dark state of mind and eventually overcome that in the very end. He's kind of almost mentored by Tobey in the end there, and that was just so beautiful. So beautiful. The theme of responsibility, highly present in this one. This is a very Spider-Man movie. This movie reeks Spider-Man. I said the past 2 MCU Spider-Man films didn't feel exactly like Spider-Man. This does. This is Spider-Man in its natural form in the best way possible, and I loved it. A lot of great action. Now, my issues with it, what holds it back from being the best, first of all, a lot of missed opportunities, which is not really a big negative. That's just kind of me nitpicking, because I wanted even more of a lot of things. I wanted more interactions with these villains. I wanted more scenes with a lot of these characters. I wanted to see even MJ and maybe a Spider-Gwen. I wanted a lot. It was high expectations, but that's not a big negative. That's just something I wanted to mention. Like I said, some of the MCU humor was a bit much. I wanted more of the original soundtracks returning. I feel like they didn't utilize those original soundtracks as much from the original movies. Like Tobey's theme was only in it for a couple seconds. They should have used more of it, that kind of a thing. Same with the villains' soundtracks. Bit of an overuse of CGI. There was a lot of moments where I felt like they didn't need to use that much CGI, but they did, and I thought it was kind of weird. Lizard and Sandman were definitely not as good as I was hoping they were going to be in terms of their character development, but Electro and Green Goblin were awesome. Definitely the best thing about the movie was Green Goblin. I talk a lot more about this movie in my spoiler review and my spoiler-free review, so go check those out on my channel. I'm not going to talk about this too much since I've already talked about it a lot this weekend, but overall, fantastic movie. One of my favorite comic book movies ever. The soundtrack's also incredible. Michael Giacchino killed it. There's a lot of amazing directing, amazing shots. MJ, well, played by Zendaya, MJ and Peter's relationship in this one was actually really good, and I actually really enjoyed it, compared to how it was in Far From Home. Just a great, fun movie that I really, really enjoyed, but Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield definitely are the ones that solidified my love for it. But number one, the best Spider-Man of all time is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 from 2004. It is going to be hard to beat this one. This movie is pretty much perfect except for one thing. There's literally one thing I don't like. That's it. I'll just say the negative right off the bat. I don't like MJ getting with J. Jonah Jameson's son. It was just such a weird thrown in thing, and it was like, it just made the situation between her and Peter just really weird, and she was just like not understanding of him at all in this movie when he had some pretty legitimate reasons to be missing her plays. I mean, his freaking bike got ran over, and she's like, "You missed my play again?" It's like, his bike got ran over, and Peter just didn't even say anything about that. Like, what? Only issue with the movie. Everything else is perfect. This has the best Peter Parker ever. Like, I already said Tobey's my favorite Peter Parker, but in terms of what they do with him in this movie, it's the best Peter Parker in this one, because Peter has to deal with a lot of real life relatable issues, a lot of money issues in this one, a lot of balance issues with his Spider-Man life, with his real life responsibilities, especially with MJ and trying to, be a good friend to her. And he obviously loves her, but he can't be with her. So he's like, shit, what am I going to do? And he can't tell her he's Spider-Man. But in the very end, he eventually, reveals himself, not purposefully, but she sees it. And it just is played out so beautifully because she realizes in that moment, oh, he does love me. He's just been staying away from me because he's Spider-Man and he doesn't want to get too close. And he also has a lot of responsibilities to take care of. So it's kind of hard for me to balance that. He has that whole plot line where he kind of loses his powers for a little bit, which everyone thought was stupid. Not everyone, but some people thought was stupid. I always liked it. I thought it was really dealing with a lot of the psychological aspects of Peter's character in these moments, and it's affecting his powers. I kind of thought that was interesting. I thought it was an interesting way to kind of show how his powers work. He's like not able to produce as much of this web stuff when he's really stressed and he's really dealing with a existential crisis, essentially, which is what he says in No Way Home. From when he had web block, he was talking about it in No Way Home. I thought that was funny. So everything with that is fantastic, and it's done beautifully. And how he stops being Spider-Man for a large portion of the film, but then comes back after realizing he needs to for a lot of reasons, because the city needs him because of Doc Ock. And Doc Ock, the best Spider-Man villain. Actually, No Way Home might make Green Goblin my new favorite, but I don't know. Doc Ock was still fantastic in this one. Doc Ock is... oh man, it's mainly because of Alfred Molina. He's just such a great actor in this role, and the arms are awesome. That one scene when he's in the hospital and it's like a horror movie scene. Everyone's getting attacked by the arms, and he's like, what the hell have I done? Because the chip in his little neck thing wasn't working properly, so the arms took over. And he's not really a bad person, but his deep love for science and just the need to have big inventions be created because he wants to see the advancement of technology as much as humanly possible, and that gets the better of him in not calculating his thing all that well, not calculating his experiments all that well. And it creates for some of the best action scenes in Spider-Man history to this day. This came out 17 years ago, and it still has some of the best action out of any Spider-Man movie, especially the train scene, especially the entire train sequence. Spider-Man versus Doc Ock on that train is probably my favorite Spider-Man scene of all time, especially when Doc Ock decides to leave after destroying the train, and the train's just going. The train's just going, and Peter has to stop it himself. That scene is glorious, where he's pulling the webs on the buildings, trying to hold it back, and he's like, he's screaming, and it just stops it just in time. He saves everyone on that train, and they all hold him back in, and they put him down, and his face is shown, but the New Yorkers, again, presented as being amazing people, like they are, and they do that in all these movies. They really show the sense of community that New York City has, and they're all just like, we won't tell anybody, man. I mean, I'm sure some of them actually did, to be honest. Let's be real. There's no way none of them actually told people. Let's be real here. But it's still a beautifully done scene. The kids are even like, we won't tell nobody. They give him his mask back. The music plays. He puts the mask back on, and then he goes after. Well, no, he actually gets right at the end there. Doc Ock comes in and knocks his ass out. The stuff with Harry in this movie was really good. Harry is on edge the whole movie because he knows that Peter knows Spider-Man, and he's like, I know you know him. I know you can probably tell me where he is. And Peter's like, I'm sorry, I don't know. And there's some tension there. And then when he finds out at the end of the movie, it's like, holy shit, it's a holy shit moment. And it leads into him finding Green Goblin stuff later on, which I think sets up his character nicely in the third one, which again, with the amnesia stuff was kind of weird what they did with him in the third one. But him in this movie specifically was fantastic. I loved all of that. JJ in this movie, J. Jonah Jameson, was probably the best he's ever been in this one, just because they gave him a lot to do with his character in this one, because obviously Peter was relying on making money from him this whole movie, so a lot of that was awesome. I mean, he was relying on the pizza place in the beginning as well, but whatever, you get the idea. A lot of cool stuff with him in this one, especially that one scene where he's like finally just saying that he actually thinks that Spider-Man's a good person, he's a hero, because he's not, there anymore. And then once he comes back and steals his suit back, he's like, oh, he's a menace. And then he has that "I want Spider-Man," like a very iconic line that he says right there, and the newspaper pops up with saying he's back. And then we see the scene where he chases after Doc Ock. There's also other good action scenes in this movie, like the bank sequence when Doc Ock's coming to steal the money and he's attacking them there. Also, Aunt May in this movie is great. Aunt May, I haven't talked about her from the Rami films, but she's amazing. I like Sally Field's Aunt May a little bit more, but she's also amazing in this one as well, this trilogy. And she was great in this movie, especially the scene where Peter's just straight up telling Aunt May that he was somewhat responsible for Uncle Ben's death, and she just can't process it at first. But then the next day, she kind of tells him that it's okay, like it's not your fault. You can't hate yourself. The first step to forgiveness is forgiving yourself. And is that what she said? I don't know. Something along those lines. Something about forgiving yourself is what I'm trying to say. And I thought it was beautiful. The themes in this movie, the storytelling, it's perfect. This is a pretty solid movie, like except for that one little thing with MJ. But even then, what they do with MJ in the end of the movie, I thought was great. So, and Kristen Dunst did a great job. It's nothing about her. It's nothing on her. She did a great job. It's just MJ herself. They just kind of do weird things with their character that I was never all fully on board with. They also do a lot of just fun Spider-Man scenes in this movie too. Also, yeah, I forgot the fire scene when he goes and saves the little kid from the fire when he's Peter Parker, and he realizes he couldn't save everyone because he wasn't Spider-Man in the moment. He wasn't in his Spider-Man suit, so he wasn't in his full form. And that was a heartbreaking scene. It was like, holy shit. So there's a lot of deep themes in this movie, a lot of deep moments, a lot of serious things. It's my favorite Spider-Man film. Definitely within my top 5, top 6 comic book movies ever for sure. So yeah, that is my ranking of all the Spider-Man films. Let me know your ranking in the comment section below. I'm going to be tier ranking every single comic book movie I've ever seen on a live stream within the next few days. So definitely be ready. Definitely subscribe to the channel so you can check out that live stream as we do it live. I have about 94 comic book superhero movies that I've seen from Marvel and from DC, and there's also a couple independent movies in there as well. We're going to be just ranking them all. That includes all the Spider-Man films, of course. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you all on my next one. Peace out.